And of course, the analysis or the unpacking of the President's State of the Nation address continues. South African Federation of Trade Unions President Zwelinzima Mavavi says his organization is not convinced by Ramaphosa's plans for the country. He joins me now in studio. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Tate Vavi. One of the issues that you firstly point out in your response to the State of the Nation address is the issue in jobs, and you feel that there was simply no real acknowledgement from the President around how serious the problem is. And yet, when I looked at the State of the Nation address, one of the first things that he prioritizes, he says, firstly, we must accelerate inclusive growth and create jobs. And then, of course, later on in the speech, he details how. Why do you think that's not enough?
Firstly, I'm the General Secretary.
Oh, apologies.
Not the President of Saftu.
Yes.
Look, let's look at the crisis we are facing. We're facing a situation where unemployment have actually climbed to 37.3%. It's a worsening problem, not a problem that we are managing in any way. Already we are the sixth economy in the world with these rates of unemployment. Number 6. When it comes to youth unemployment, at 52%, we are number 1 in the whole world when it comes to youth unemployment. The situation is getting worse all the time, 9.8 million. And every economist that will speak to you will tell you that it is inevitable, that when Statistics South Africa issues its report in a few weeks, it will confirm that unemployment rate have now reached over 10 million. Now that's something that you cannot even begin to describe. It's a catastrophe beyond a catastrophe. When you have 4 out of every 10 of your people unable to find employment opportunities, you ought to declare a state of emergency. You ought to say that this is a crisis around which every effort must be put in place to ensure that it is arrested. You cannot embark on a business as usual approach.
But do you get the sense that it's business as usual? Because if nothing else, that State of the Nation address has especially been praised for its business outlook, because you have things like the job summit, the investment drive, the growth of direct foreign investment into the country, all of those being initiatives to boost the economy and hopefully activate the creation of jobs.
And that's why business in South Africa is so happy about that address yesterday, and that's why they believe that their heavens have really opened and they can't believe what is happening. These business people, at least in 1994, were expecting that the ANC will implement the economic demands of the Freedom Charter, will embark on a program to redistribute wealth from the rich to the poor. What have happened in South Africa is that redistribution have happened in reverse. They were expecting that the government that will come in will nationalize the mines, will nationalize the land, will make sure that the monopoly industries, the banks, will be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. That would be a radical economic transformation that some in the ANC have been speaking about. So there is not even an attempt to engage with that discussion.
What about where the President acknowledges that there are huge parts of the population, especially many young entrepreneurs, who've been left out of the economy, and they've introduced the competition amendment bill to try and, level the playing field, as it were, and allow more young black people to access parts of the economy and sectors of the economy that were not there before? Why do you think that and many of the other initiatives that the President announced simply don't go far enough?
By the way, that's a very brilliant intervention. This idea that you can use competition authorities to begin to unravel the concentration of wealth into a few big conglomerates in the country is a very important step. But it is 25 years into democracy. For 25 years, nobody thought about practically what do we mean by redistribution of wealth from the rich to the poor. Instead, what we have been doing, we've embraced neoliberalism. We have been cutting taxes at the time when everybody thought that the first thing that we're going to do is to introduce solidarity tax, is to introduce wealth tax, is to make sure that the people who can afford to pay greater taxes pay greater taxes. Now we dropped our taxes from around 45% in 1994. They are now standing at around 28%. There has been an absolute unbelievable conservative liberalization of our tax policies. And yet, last year, the poor saw their VAT being increased from 14 to 15%. All manner of sin taxes were introduced. You've seen that we hardly coping with the rates at which the petrol prices are increasing. All of these things load an unbelievable, they place an unbelievable load on the shoulders of the poor in the country. So it is, if you look at the speech in the overall, notwithstanding some of the very important progressive announcements that were being made yesterday, but in the overall, it is not a speech that will say to a black person who is the face of poverty, to a youth who is the face of this scourge and epidemic rise of our youth trapped in drugs, in violence, in vigilantism, in gangs, that, hold on, your liberation is finally on.
What about initiatives such as the innovation hubs that the president says are going to be built in especially townships to ensure that small businesses will be able to access services that they never accessed before and perhaps unlock further opportunity for themselves?
That would be important if that was to happen. Remember, we're talking here in the context where black businesses in the townships are being wiped out altogether, completely, by a combination of two factors. The first factor is the movement of the big retail shops into the townships, and they kill anything close radiously to where they are located. That's the first fact. The second factor is the dumping of foreign goods that we suspect come through corruptly in the borders of the country, which have made sure that no black person can afford to operate a shop of his own or her own.
But to try and mitigate that, you have...
Fine, but we have to recognize the extent at which 25 years of democracy have simply wiped out those black businesses. To talk as if you are talking in the context where those black business shops and spaza shops have been retained when they have been wiped out from the face of the earth is to be triumphalist and not to really face the realities that our people are facing.
So are you saying that part of that State of the Nation address then, in terms of its tone, is out of touch with the lived reality of the South Africans which you are talking about today? The unemployed young people who are in townships, who you say have very little access to this opportunity, and those that did have it before, it has been taken out of their hands.
There's a big gulf between the president's world. It's like he's living in another planet, and the realities of our black working class trapped in poverty, unemployment, inequality, squalor in the informal settlements and in the townships. Let's, for example, just look at the issue of jobs, and just to demonstrate the point that we're making. The president was almost boasting and beating his chest that from the job summit, we're going to be creating 275,000 jobs in the economy annually. But here's what most people will remember, that actually Between 2008 and 2017, this economy, South Africa, where the president is a president, loses 350,000 jobs every year. And that last year alone, 1 million jobs disappear. That's the first factor. Let's look at the second factor. The NDP, when it was introduced in 2009, promised the country that, look guys, we're going to be creating 11 million jobs by 2030.
And of course, we've been falling short on those NDP outlines and expectations
we are not even accounting
for
that.
years
now. We are
now.
going more and more conservatives in our estimation. There are 400,000 people who enter into the labor market in South Africa yearly. And the president says we will create only 275,000 jobs for those people. So we're talking about a worsening crisis, a crisis that he just doesn't know what to do about, which is going to continue to worsen, and whilst the investors continue to rake as much as it is possible out of the economy of South Africa.
I want to talk to you then, just because we are running out of time, and I want us to cover other themes. The issue of Eskom and the unbundling of Eskom. Some unions have seen it as a threat to workers' jobs. What's your take? I specifically wanted to talk about the consultation process that you would want to go into it as unions. Already, you're raising some level of skepticism about whether or not unions will be consulted.
No, we're calling it a declaration of war. Unbundling of Eskom, in our view, is a start towards privatizing each of those components of Eskom and selling it over to the highest bidder. Already this government, if it was serious about a just transition, if it was serious about the need to consult communities and the labor movement, it would have done it already. Government have introduced and signed an agreement with 27 independent power producers behind the backs of the people of Mpumalanga, where we are told up to 5 power stations are going to have to be closed, and behind the backs of its own workers. No consultation whatsoever.
One of the energy experts we spoke to, my colleague Kolim Gambi spoke to him earlier on in the day, Chris Yelland, he says that thoughts about job losses are just a red herring, that in fact that will not be the case because this unbundling will require more human mechanization instead of relying on technology.
Oh, that's nonsense. Already we were told that there would be more jobs when telecom was privatized. We were told that more jobs are going to be coming when post office was commercialized. We were told many jobs are coming your way when SAA was being commercialized. I can go on, and we can all see the trend. As soon as the government stepped back in driving development agenda to ensure that the crisis at hand of underdevelopment in the economy is addressed, as soon as it begins to hand over that responsibility to private firms who only come to the party for one reason only, and that is to generate profits, we know what is going to then follow after that. Jobs are going to disappear in mass. Already we fear, and that's what we know, as soon as those IPPs, which are already being subsidized by Eskom, as soon as they become a reality, and as soon as they close those 5 power stations, we estimate that up to 90,000 jobs are going to be lost in the Mpumalanga region. And that's a region that is already so under-repressed. You know that that's where the steel activities used to be.
It's quite small too. It's quite small too in terms of the pockets of where activity, business activity takes place. So just to get your final thoughts, very briefly, to sum up your impressions of the President's State of the Nation address, is it a yes or a no from you?
Definitely a big no from us. It's a pro-business speech, and you can see why they are excited this morning. And Uherigwala told us something. When you speak and do things, always check who's giving you a round of applause. And the people who have been giving the round of applause to our president are the people who owns the economy. The people who are hopeless about the future are the people who are trapped in unemployment, poverty, and inequality in our country.
All right, let's leave it there for this afternoon. As Zwelinzima Vavi, he is the General Secretary of Saftu.